Does the Bible say anything about current events? It certainly does.
It's our focus to be culturally relevant and to communicate a perspective from the Scriptures.
As Christians, we should have a biblical perspective of the news and be able to share that perspective with others. Welcome to today's news and biblical views. The Bible tells us in 1 Chronicles chapter 12, verse 32, that the men of Issachar understood the times in which they lived and knew what Israel ought to do. You and I ought to understand the times in which we live, and we ought to understand what we ought to do. On this program, we try to pick up on things that are happening in the news and then show you a biblical perspective. And today we're going to be talking about racing for God rather than racing for man. And we have a special guest with us today who at one time in his life was involved in racing. So if you have any friends or relatives that are into Formula One racing or NASCAR or IndyCar racing, please have them watch this program. Today's guest is Pastor Max Pera, and he is from Newark, New Jersey area, and he pastors two different churches. Max, welcome to today's News and Biblical Views.
Thank you.
It's so great to be able to be friends together and pastors, and we've known each other now for quite a number of years. And we're excited to have you on the program.
I am excited to be here.
And Max, could you please tell us where you grew up and where you went to school?
Well, I'm born in São Paulo, and I grew up in Brazil for 25 years. I was there. I lived in São Paulo until I was 7, and then we moved to another state up north in Minas Gerais, and that's where I grew up and went to school. I went to dentistry school back in Brazil in 1987, and I graduated in 1992, and I did some work back in Brazil until I came here.
Yes, until you came here. Well, you come from a very beautiful country. I love Brazil. I've been there 3 times. And I love those churrascaria restaurants with all that good Brazilian food, where they slice it off, like the Rios restaurant in Nazareth.
Yes.
You've been there?
Oh, been there, done that. Not too many times, but it's good. It's delightful on that. Yeah, it is a wonderful country, and you know real football too. We enjoy.
Yes, that's true.
Yeah, it's very enjoyable. Max, glad that you're here on the show too. We also really like to know about our families too. And can you tell us a little bit about your family too?
Yes. Well, I'm married to Priscilla, my beautiful wife, and we have 2 kids. There are twins, a boy and a girl, Samuel and Anna Laura. Right now they're 15 years old. They're a joy.
Yes, I have met his family, really, really wonderful family, his wife and the 2 children. Max, we're going to be talking about racing for God rather than racing for man. But before we jump into the formal racing, we're going to talk about your faith. How did Jesus Christ become real to you, Max?
Well, I believe it was a long journey. My family, they were atheists. Our background, my mother's side is Muslim and my father's side was Jewish, and but they did not believe in God. So I don't know. I always have the pull towards believing in God. We lived in a beautiful place in Brazil, and my room had a window towards the sunrise and mountains, and every day I look at the sunrise. And I couldn't understand how God would not exist. So I was questioning him. My parents says, "Oh, there's no God. And I think after that, there were several Christians that tried to share the gospel with me, but I think I had a heart that was still hardened until I moved to this country. And in this country, I start seeking more. I had a friend who gave him a Bible, and I start reading the Bible. At the time, I didn't know what church to look for. I met some Mormon missionaries, and they talked to me, and I was in the Mormon church for about a year. I decided to go into their seminary to learn more, and then I started comparing the Bible with their scriptures, and they wouldn't match. So after a while, I believed that I wasn't in the right place, and I start reading the Bible by myself. I I decided to go through the whole Bible. We start in Genesis 1, and I went through, and when it came to James 1:5, it said that if I need wisdom and I ask, I would receive, and that's what I prayed that day. And I say, this is what I need. I want to know which one is the true church of God in this earth, or should I go to an evangelicals, Mormons, what it was. And right after that, a few days after, a friend of mine, he liked to fish. He went and caught a lot of fish that day, and he called me. He knew that I love eating fish, so he says, I have too many, come in my house, and I want to give you some fish. And when I got there, he had a Bible on top of the table. So he was trying to hook me to.
Excellent.
So that day we start talking about the Bible. He invited me to go to church. I went to his church. I heard the gospel, and I gave my life to Jesus Christ that day.
Wow. You recognized your need.
I did.
Of salvation. And that's the man that we met, that you saw the day. This is an amazing story, Rob. Max and I were having lunch together in Newark. And he's sharing his testimony that he shared now of how Jesus Christ used another person to help him come to know the Lord. And while we're talking about his testimony, Max glanced out the window. He said, there goes the man right there on the street. And you hadn't seen him for years.
And since, I haven't seen him for years, and I haven't seen him since that day.
Yeah, that's a great testimony too. And it goes to show even folks that are watching the show that sometimes they're searching and looking.
Right.
That going into the scriptures and reading the scriptures, and of course having a person to be able to sit down and is like, so what do you think about Jesus? Who is this Jesus? And would you have a desire to follow him and confess your sins as well? So thank you.
Yes. I was a proud man. I did a lot of things in my life. I like sports. I building my career. So I had a lot of pride in my heart and my accomplishments and everything. And when I read the Bible, and I saw that none of that I did would make it. So I need to humble myself and just trust Jesus Christ for my salvation.
Makes life a lot more precious and richer in many ways. So one of the things that you were kind of describing, and folks probably listening too, so dentist, pastor, and racing. So a few careers here. Can you share a little bit about that, some of the careers that you've had?
Well, yes. At a technical level, before I went to degree school, I did chemistry. And I start working with that, decided that's not what I want to do. I want to advance in my studies. Then I always loved medicine at the time, and I ended up going to dental school, and I loved working as a dentist back in Brazil. It was very interesting. I was able to do some work with poor people and to go into medical missions, not Christian missions, just medical missions. And from there, I thought that would be wonderful to be able to help more people. So I enjoyed that. Later, I decided to come to America. My family, my parents were divorced, and my mother and my sisters, they moved to America in 1987, and I haven't seen them a lot. So I was, looking for opportunity to learn English. I didn't speak any English when I came here, and to advance on my studies and to be, some time with my family too. So that's when I came, and God saved me here.
Wow. It's amazing because sometimes somebody may ask, it's like, wow, with all the different experience that you've had, and you're only 25 years old. It's amazing.
At the time, yes.
But being able to shape us and make us who we are. And of course, we're gonna take a break, and then we're gonna come back, and we're gonna talk a little bit more particular about the racing and some opportunities on that. Thank you for joining us on today's News and Biblical Views, and we'll be back right after this message. Welcome back to today's News and Biblical Views, and today we're talking with Pastor Max about racing for God. And Max, it's been a delight talking at this point, and we're going to get into the racing aspects of our conversation. So Larry, you may have a question or two here.
Yeah. Brazil is really well known for its racing.
Yes.
And you grew up in Brazil. In fact, your father was a
race driver.
A race driver and had a factory making race cars.
Yeah.
And so tell us, how did you get interested then? Was it mostly through your father?
Oh, definitely, yes. I don't know. I think I started like racing before I walked.
Really?
My father was my best friend ever, and we were very close. And his influence definitely shaped me. And I love racing since I was really young. I dressed up on suits and I had a helmet, and since I was little. And as soon as I had opportunity, to be in my little pedal cars, I would be, racing someone. Yeah, so I loved, being with my father and racing. And then as he raced, and we were able, he was always taking me together and being part of it. So that's how I got to love racing. Yeah.
As a child, it's amazing how things happen as a child and they carry through in life.
Yeah, that's so true. And racing is all around, especially in our region. We've had the opportunity to go see some of the quarter midgets.
Right.
Bonnie, when she was teaching first grade, she had some of her first graders that were actually driving quarter midgets, and it is just wonderful. And then just recently, my neighbor was doing junk car racing, and I said, well, I'll go check that out at one of the local fairgrounds. That was a toot, because now they're racing, but they're also banging into each other. Right. So there's all these different types of racing. A little close to it, but this is a different type of racing in many ways. But can you kind of describe the difference? Because I don't even think I know Formula One, IndyCar, World Sports Car Championship, and NASCAR races. What's the difference between all those? Because we have so many different ones.
Well, yes, they're different. Like Indies and Formula Ones, there are open wheel cars. There are more racing built, engines and cars. They are built for speed. They are very fast. They have wings to help them glued to the floor. Yes, they're very fast. Formula One is the top racing car. They're well developed and a lot of money into it. Factories, the best drivers will be on Formula One. Indy is not too far behind. They're very close. They're very fast cars. While Formula One became more international, Indy, it's more like a North American sports that became international too. They go sometimes out, but it's more like, let's say, a local sports. But they build fast cars, much cheaper. So the entry level is easier for drivers to go, but it still requires the same skills as a Formula One driver. So we have great drivers from Indy cars too. Yeah, the World Sports Car, they're more like a prototype kind of car. It's different than open wheels. They're enclosed cars, so you're inside a car and the wheels are covered around with fenders. It's different, but it's still a racing machine. So there's a lot of development in engine and chassis and everything. They're very fast and they're built for endurance. So most of the races are 6, 12, 24 hours. So usually one car will have more than one driver driving during the race. They will switch drivers. It is a fun, but it's a long racing. It is very interesting. So test endurance of the driver, the machine, and everything. NASCAR, it's a stock car. It began as a stock car as cars came out of the factory. Nowadays, it's not that. They look like those cars, but they're not. They are also racing machines. They are built from the scratch. But there is some parameters that they have to follow, the dimensions and the look. It's kind of similar to the stock car that you have in a street. So
it's pretty fascinating on those different types of cars. And we were talking even before the show a little bit that I guess in the future is electric cars that are coming into those spaces too?
Well, not in the future. They are here already. Wow. So now they have the Formula One that's electric, the Formula E. So they have been racing, for 3 or 4 years already around the world. There are other cars and the lower levels also doing electrical. So I guess we will have that in the future. I don't know if that will be the future, but definitely they will be with gas engines too.
Max, in this whole area here of the Lehigh Valley, the name of Mario Andretti, of course, is world famous because the Andretti family live, many of them are right here in Nazareth. And you had the opportunity back in 2003, 2004 to actually sign a contract with the Andrettis. Tell us about that.
Yes, I was doing some racing, and Marco was the grandson of Mario, the son of Michael. He was a young teenager. He was racing and getting skills, getting prepared for his career into the family, and he had people helping him, and I was racing some circuits that sometimes he would be there, and someone from the company saw me racing, and I was already a mature man. I wasn't a young kid at the time, so they were looking for people to help him grow and the skills. So at the time, someone talked to me and offered me to join, their company and be part of, preparing Marco for the future, and I would have some opportunities also to race in different, because the Andrettis, they are racing everything. They have wheels.
And if you don't mind me even mentioning this, I believe you mentioned that contract was for $250,000.
Yeah.
And you passed it up. He passed up that contract. And your next question is going to lead into what happened that he passed up that contract.
Yeah. So one Sunday morning, you're at a church service, and an amazing and incredible opportunity here. And what connected with that contract? And you were just getting ready to sign that. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, it wasn't Sunday morning. It was Sunday night. Our church,
Sunday night. Okay.
Brazilian church, they usually meet at night, not in the morning. So and that was a good thing for me, because I raced on Sundays, and I would sometimes just have enough time just to get back to the church and not even get home. So that day, I just finished the race down here in Pennsylvania, and I drove up to Newark, and I had my suit that was dirty. It was smelling fuel and rubber, and so when I had to go to church straight from the track, many times I just sat in the back of the church in a corner. They had the sound system, so nobody was sitting around, so I wouldn't bother anybody with my smell. And my wife came and sat, graciously next to me, and I heard the message. I had my heart really aching for being available to serve the Lord more deeply. I was involved in the church a lot, and even in racing, I did a lot of evangelism, prayer, and the track. But I wanted to be more involved. And that day, we were end of the service, we were worshiping, and I just hear this voice, talking to me. Are you willing to give up what you love most? And I was like, what is that? I thought someone spoke to me, and I look on the side, just the wall, and the other side is my wife just singing, and say, well, I guess God is speaking to me. And I just close my eyes again, and I start praying, and he says again, are you willing to give up what you love most? And I was like, yes. I was recently married. I just had bought a house. I was like, what do you want? You want my wife? You want my house? What are you asking from me? So from there, the service ended. I was sitting with my wife, and then a couple came to me. They weren't pastors. They're just leading the youth group, and they were going to have a retreat, and they asked me if I could come and help. I used to be a Boy Scout leader, and I had experience, and I love work with young people. So my pastor told them that they could try with me. So they came and talked to me if I was available to be chaperones on that camp. And I say, yes, I am available. And then I asked, when is that going to happen? And when they say the date, it was the date they were supposed to be meeting with the headquarters.
Wow.
Yeah,
that's spectacular.
And right then, God intervened.
Yeah. And the beauty of that is we see making ourselves available, saying, God, whatever and wherever you would have me to go. And then also the calling into ministry. Far too many times we don't hear about that, but God may be tugging in someone's heart, and maybe someone watching this show too, that not only just being in a business world, but maybe also to be a pastor and a shepherd and a church too. We're going to take a break, and we're going to come back. Thank you again for being with us on today's news, and we'll be back right after this message. Welcome back to today's News and Biblical Views, and I'm Rob Fields along with Pastor Larry Burd, and today we're talking with Pastor Max on the topic of racing for God. And before we went to the break, Max, you were sharing about God calling you into a ministry role, and with the many careers that He has shaped you and brought you into into this space. But thank you again for being on the show. And Larry, you had some questions there.
I just wanted to comment too, Max, how that God had you in that church service where you heard the voice of God in the Spirit speaking to you, that what would you be willing to give up? And when your wife said to you, well, that's the date that you're going to sign the contract with the Andretti family, and you just right then, you knew that God was calling you into the ministry. So tell us a little bit about your ministry now. You're pastoring 2 churches, one in Newark and one in Long Branch. Tell us a little bit about those.
Yes. Well, I discovered that I love church planting, and at the church, they did a church plant at the time. I wasn't a pastor or even and had much theological training, but I was available to help. So I was part of their church planting in Astoria at the time. So after that, I saw that I had a passion to see church getting started, and I decided to go to school. So I did an MDiv, Baptist Bible Seminary in Clark Summit, Pennsylvania. And throughout my studies, I met Pastor Ken Daves, who was the director of Project Jerusalem, who were working planting churches in the northeast area of the United States. So they had a team for Astoria, and they asked me if I want to join them. So I joined that team, and I helped plant a multi-ethnic church in Queens at the time. And then from there, I helped plant another church in Manhattan. And then during that time, a church in Newark is a Brazilian church. The pastor just had died. I had preached there a few times, and they invited me to come and to help. And I started helping that church. They decided they want me as their pastor, so I was there for about a year. After a year, the love was gone, so they threw me out. And there was a lot of new believers that were reaching. It was a small church, and we had a large group of new believers that needed to be baptized and discipled. And came to a time they said, we don't want you here. And so they told me to leave and start another church. So I left, and so the next Sunday we started a church with 60 people in Newark.
That's unusual.
Wow.
Yeah.
And with ministry, we know there's challenges. We could
Yes.
all talk about those and spend a couple of shows on it. But what are some of the exciting things when you're describing this of ministry work and with the churches or even with the space that you're in now?
Well, I love Newark because it's also multi-ethnic, and I like to work with people from all places and languages and ethnicities, and it's great to be there. It's still, we do Portuguese, do Spanish, we do English, so I'm able to speak those languages. So I think tools that God gave me that I can use them into ministry. So I'm learning new languages right now because I want to be able to reach more people in the area. So I am excited. And then later, Long Branch came into play, and they needed some help down there, and then we started planting that church. So I love being in ministry, work with young people, and right now we have a youth group that's going wonderful. I have people coming from Manhattan, Bronx, Queens, into Newark, just to be part of what we're doing there. And I think it's amazing. It's one thing that I love is that preparing people that from different places, different countries, once they decide to go back, they are taking the gospel with them.
Max, are there some scriptures that have really impacted your life that you'd want to share?
Well, one I told you, James 1:5, definitely that was the impact on my life. And the second one is 2 Corinthians chapter 4, verse 5. As I went to the ministry, and one thing that I read that Paul said that I think it became my motto, I preach not myself, I preach Jesus Christ as my Lord. I think that's what we have to remember.
Yeah.
Max, I'm sure people are asking this, and I remember as Paul is writing a letter to the Colossians, and he speaks very clearly about not having our minds and hearts set on earthly things, but on heavenly things. And I guess the question would be along this lines, do you have any regrets of not signing like the contract with the Andretti family? Because people would ask that from that earthly, heavenly.
Right.
What would you say to that?
Not at all. Not at all. I have no regrets. I miss racing. Yes, I do miss racing, but I have no regrets. No regrets on leaving my profession, on leaving this opportunity. I found so much joy in Jesus Christ that there's no way to measure or to compare. I think I'm doing something much greater right now.
Well, and that's part of that calling too, right?
Yeah.
God's called you into this, and there's that degree of obedience, but also that peace and just being with Him and in the space. There are, unfortunately, a lot of people that are in professions that are doing things that's not God's calling in, and it's just really rough and tough going on.
Max, people watching this program today, some people are probably racing toward God, other people are racing away from God. What would you just say to someone who seems to be racing, trying to get away from God?
Well, pull the handbrakes of repentance and spin your car around. Give 180 a spin and just step on the gas and follow Jesus Christ and race towards Him. This is the best way. Do you know which one is my favorite track in the world?
Your favorite track?
My favorite track.
No, what is your favorite track?
John 14. John 14 says that He prepared a place for us, and then on verse 6 it says, "I am the way, I am the truth and the life." So we need to race towards Him and go to find this prize that's ultimate life, eternal life.
Amen. Amen. How wonderful to be able to interview a man who gave his life fully and completely to Christ. Passed up signing an amazing contract, but he's following Jesus. Are you racing toward Jesus, or are you racing away from Him? Turn to Him. You'll never regret it.